A top member of a Mexican drug cartel who had a bounty over his head in the U.S. is now dead.
Mañana, Magdaleno Mesa Funes fue sacado 3 veces de su módulo, como que si hubiesen estado esperando a que estuviera completamente listo el grupo de que iba a acabar con su vida.
When drug lords get caught, their rivals don't just kill them off quietly, they film it. Because in the world of cartels, power isn't just about who you kill, it's about who sees it. Here's La Catrina, once one of Mexico's most notorious female drug lords, covered in blood and just minutes away from death. But she's not alone. So let's take a look at 12 times drug lords were brutally killed on camera. On May 20th, 2025, Juan Carlos Santiago Kokuyo, a plaza boss for the CJNG, was kidnapped in broad daylight by La Barredora, an armed group tied to drug lord Ismael El Mayo Zambada, before he was executed on camera. But to understand how Kokuyo ended up there, we have to go back to his early days operating out of Veracruz, because back then, he was just a low-level member of the CJNG. But after years of proving his loyalty, he climbed the ranks and became the plaza boss in charge of 3 towns, Nanchatal, Agua Dulce, and Las Chiripas. Under the alias Lobo Veracruz, he managed everything from drug trafficking to extortion. Plus, Kokuyo confessed to working closely with Mexican politician Elvis Ventura, helping to provide him with security and muscle during Ventura's political campaign. That was extra proof of just how far the CJNG's influence reaches in local politics, because Ventura's position made him an important figure in the CJNG's plan to dominate southern Veracruz, an area already crawling with rivals like the Sinaloa Cartel, the Zetas, and other criminal groups. Meanwhile, La Barredora, backed by the Sinaloa Cartel, had recently moved into Veracruz specifically to challenge CJNG's control. And on that infamous day in May, they ambushed Kokuyo and made sure to film the whole thing. Now, after interrogating him and making him spill some vital information on the CJNG's internal network, they proceeded to execute him like a dog. And despite having so many guns that could have made the job easier, they chose to use a knife to cut off his head slowly and painfully, as the knife sliced through his veins. In the days that followed, the killing sparked a lot of reactions across Veracruz, and La Barredora claimed full responsibility for it. They also claimed to be protecting civilians from CJNG's violence. But that narrative didn't exactly land, especially since they're deeply tied to crime themselves. Still, the killing was a clear sign of the ongoing turf war, and a warning to anyone who dared to cross their path.
South of the border, a key member of a Mexican drug cartel who had a bounty over his head in the U.S. is dead.
Jorge Humberto Figueroa Benitez, known as El Peris, was killed during a Mexican government raid. He was part of the Los Chapitos faction of the Sinaloa cartel, accused of trafficking fentanyl into the U.S.
On October 17, 2019, El Peris was caught on video firing his .50 caliber Barrett rifle at Sedena forces during the Culiacanazo, taking down a member of Mexico's National Guard. But on May 24, 2025, officers from Mexico's Secretariat of National Defense made him pay for what he had done by killing him and recording the moment for the world to see the kind of bag he truly was. El Peris, whose real name was Jorge Humberto Figueroa Benitez, was one of the top drug lords under the Sinaloa cartel. He aligned himself with the Los Chapitos faction, and the U.S. government had even placed a $1 million bounty on his head. But long before that, El Peris began his criminal career working with the Damasos, another faction of the Sinaloa cartel, before switching sides to Los Chapitos, the group led by the sons of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. He quickly earned their trust and later joined Los Ninis, a brutal enforcement arm of the cartel, known for its extreme violence. By the early 2020s, El Peris had taken on an even bigger role, overseeing security operations for El Chapo's sons, Ivan Archivaldo Guzman and Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar. His influence grew even more after the 2023 arrest of Nestor Isidro Perez Salas, aka El Nini, which allowed El Peris to rise as one of the cartel's top security bosses. And keep in mind that El Peris wasn't just handling security. He played a major role in trafficking fentanyl, which is why the US had that massive bounty on his head. He also killed a member of the Mexican National Guard during the October 2019 Battle of Culiacan, also known as the Culiacanazo. And again, in September 2024, he led a revenge attack against Mexican forces. His crew used grenades to help him escape, once again showing his ability to slip away when things get hot. But around this time, the Sinaloa cartel itself was falling apart. There were growing tensions between Los Chapitos and the rival La Mesa faction, which remained loyal to longtime cartel boss Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Whispers started going around that El Peris was getting tired of the game and possibly cooperating with US and Mexican authorities. Some even claimed he was the one who kidnapped El Mayo and put him on that plane that landed in the US, leading to his arrest. So whether those rumors were true or not, they put a giant target on his back, and it's believed that someone from La Mesa tipped off the military about where he was hiding. And so by May 2025, Mexican forces had zeroed in on his location, even launching a multi-day operation with full ground and air support. And on the final day, they decided to humiliate, depends on how you see it. They needed the world to see El Peris take his final breath. But it didn't go down that easily. His sicarios fought back with everything they had, as this video shows. Still, they were eventually outgunned, and El Peris was taken down. Here are the disturbing photos shared online of his lifeless body.
Tranquila, mija, ya viene el helicóptero por ti. Ya viene el helicóptero. Tranquila, hija, tranquila. Vas a estar bien. Trata de aguantar, ¿eh?
That was Maria Guadalupe Lopez, bleeding out and barely hanging on after a violent clash with Mexican authorities. Her final moments were caught on camera, raw, unfiltered, and haunting. Yet it stood in stark contrast to the image she had maintained for years, having evaded capture and become one of Mexico's most feared and elusive female drug lords. In 2017, at the age of 17 years old, Maria Guadalupe left her home in the Los Chiritos neighborhood and got involved with the Jalisco New Generation cartel. People often say it all started because of her relationship with Miguel LM2 Fernandez, a high-ranking member of the cartel. But under his wing, she quickly climbed the ranks and started going by the nickname La Catrina, a name inspired by the iconic Day of the Dead skeleton figure, which she even tattooed on her thigh. And unlike some drug lords, La Catrina didn't exactly keep a low profile. On social media, she posted photos of herself posing with guns, showing off a flashy lifestyle that made her look fearless and bold. Meanwhile, for the CJNG, she was involved in organizing kidnappings, extortion, and even assassinations. One of the most brutal events she was linked to happened on October 14, 2019, in a town called El Aguaje, Aguililla. According to reports, she and LM2 helped coordinate an ambush on state police. 13 officers were killed and 9 more were injured. After the attack, the cartel left behind messages threatening rival groups and law enforcement, making it clear just how much control they had over the area. However, La Catrina's life would come to an end not long after, as in January 2020, in the town of La Bocanda, Tepocatepec, Mexican authorities, including the Army, National Guard, and State Police, raided a CJNG safe house after getting a tip. A shootout broke out, and Maria Guadalupe, who was just 21 at the time, was shot in the neck. Videos and photos from that day quickly spread online, showing her bloody and struggling to breathe. A soldier tried to help her, telling her to hang on while they waited for a helicopter, but the damage was too severe. She died from massive blood loss, which doctors later confirmed was due to hypovolemic shock. During the raid, 6 armed men were arrested and military-grade weapons were recovered, but somehow LM2 managed to escape.
Vergazón, mira que le pegaron ahí el mono viene enfrente, ¿no? Mira, la plebada anda echando plomo al vergazo, mira.
Well, that video shows the immediate aftermath of the shooting that killed a high-ranking Chapillos operative from the Sinaloa cartel. And I'm talking about none other than one of the most elusive drug lords in Mexico, El Chore. El Chore had earned a fearsome reputation within the Sinaloa cartel, specifically with the Los Chapitos faction. He wasn't just a mid-level enforcer. He was the plaza boss of El Dorado, an area recently established as a new municipality in Sinaloa. His name alone sparked fear in the region, thanks to his brutal tactics and his role in maintaining cartel dominance. But before he climbed the ranks under Los Chapitos, El Chore was originally loyal to Damaso Lopez Serrano, another high-profile figure in the Sinaloa cartel. Back then, he worked as a trusted sicario, a hitman, helping secure key drug trafficking routes and taking out enemies across Sinaloa, a state known for being a production hub for fentanyl and meth. But by 2017, everything shifted. El Chore broke ties with Los Damaso and joined forces with Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, the son of Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. That same year, Los Chapesos launched a bloody campaign to wipe out Los Damaso, and El Chore ended up taking full control as the plaza boss in El Dorado. From there, he oversaw everything: drug manufacturing, trafficking, and keeping rival factions like those loyal to Ismael El Mayo Zambada out of their territory. His leadership also helped turn El Dorado into a stronghold for the Chapitos, but it also made him a high-priority target for the government. In the months leading up to the operation, Mexican military and National Guard forces had been keeping tabs on El Chore. Surveillance had increased, and authorities had recently seized a ranch linked to him in the nearby La Flor community, part of the growing pressure on his network. And then finally, on June 23, 2024, they went all out to take El Chore down. In the early morning hours, soldiers arrived at the trailer yard in Sanchez Cele, where El Chore and his security team were holed up, and almost immediately, gunmen opened fire, kicking off a firefight that lasted more than 40 minutes. Reinforcements poured in, with dozens of Mexico's Sedena units and armed helicopters providing air support. Meanwhile, El Chore's men fought back hard, but the military's numbers and firepower overwhelmed them. And by sunrise, the fighting was over, with El Chore, along with 7 of his gunmen, confirmed dead. But the operation's success didn't come without fallout. Tensions flared in El Dorado almost immediately, as relatives of the dead cartel members confronted soldiers in anger, furious over the deaths of their sons and husbands. The emotional reactions highlighted just how deeply the cartel had embedded itself in the community and how much love they had for criminals. But while El Chore's fall weakened the Chapitos for the moment, their power structure remained intact, and it's likely that others within the faction will step up to fill the void he left behind. September 28, 2024, Jaime Daniel Gutierrez Garcia, better known as El Toro, was killed in a chilling hit that was actually recorded by his assassin. The footage, shared on Instagram by the account Yente de la Tijuana, shows a gunman calmly parked on a bike beside a gray SUV. And when a man believed to be El Toro attempts to get into the SUV, the assailant fires multiple shots until El Toro goes down. But this wasn't just some random act of violence. It was the result of a long-standing vendetta, most likely carried out by rivals in the Sinaloa cartel. Specifically, the faction led by Alfonso Arzate Garcia, aka El Aquiles, who's part of the Mayo Zambada wing. It's believed the hit was payback for a string of earlier violent events, including the tragic and mistaken killing of a boy in Culiacan on January 7, 2024, a murder allegedly ordered by Gutierrez Garcia himself. Now, before his death, Gutierrez Garcia had already managed to cheat death at least twice in big, headline-worthy ways, which just shows how much of a wanted man he was. The first close call happened right after that innocent boy was murdered. Believing Gutierrez Garcia's men were behind it, a ranch in the Lomas de San Miguel area was shot up and firebombed by gunmen driving 2 trucks. But Garcia wasn't there at the time. However, the second attempt on his life came on February the 26th, 2024, in an upscale neighborhood in Tijuana called Cumbres de Juarez. At least 8 hitmen, supposedly from the Sinaloa cartel, got into the gated community using a U-Haul truck disguised as a moving van. They smashed through the entrance and opened fire on a house on Avenida Via Toscana. which Gutierrez Garcia had been renting for about 3 years. His bodyguards shot back, and the whole thing turned into a wild 15 to 20-minute gunfight that shook the quiet area. But somehow, Gutierrez Garcia and 4 of his gunmen escaped. 7 of the attackers were arrested, 1 was wounded, and police seized a stash of weapons and tactical gear. All of this forced Garcia into hiding. He stayed on the move, heavily guarded, and eventually relocated to Tijuana, where he managed to stay underground for a while, right up until the hit that finally got him. For some reason, he wasn't with his security that day, and that assassin made sure to record the moment, signaling to Garcia's crew that their leader had been taken out in the simplest yet most brutal way possible. Carlos Enrique Sanchez was executed on camera. For context, Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez, better known as El Cholo, was once a big name in Mexico's criminal world, especially in Jalisco. At one point, he was one of the most trusted allies of Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho, the leader of the CJNG. He also led a faction of CJNG's hit squad and was often referred to as El Mencho's compadre, which gives you an idea of how close they were. But that tight relationship fell apart in 2017, and what followed was a violent fallout that turned parts of Guadalajara into a war zone. The whole thing started after the murder of El Colombiano, a major financial operator for the CJNG. El Mencho believed El Cholo was behind it and labeled him a traitor. And rather than lie low, El Cholo pushed back. He teamed up with Eric Valencia Salazar, known as L85, and together they launched the Cartel Nueva Plaza, a breakaway group designed to go head-to-head with the CJNG for control of Jalisco. They also allegedly teamed up with the Sinaloa cartel's top dogs, like Ismael El Mayo Zambada, for some guns, manpower, and cash to take control of the drug routes running through Jalisco, Colima, Nayarit, and Michoacan. Unsurprisingly, the turf war between both cartels triggered a surge in violence across cities like Zapopan, Tonalá, Tlajomulco de Zúñiga, and Tlaquepaque. El Cholo's group was particularly tied to several brutal incidents, one of the worst being the killing of 11 construction workers in Tonalá in February 2020. His strategy was to heat up the plaza, in other words, stir up chaos and instability, to weaken El Mencho's grip on the area. Some believe this was also meant to take advantage of El Mencho's rumored health issues, including possible kidney failure. But if there's one thing this whole story makes clear, it's that when it comes to the CJNG, no one, absolutely no one, can match their firepower or influence. El Cholo and his crew didn't stand a chance. It was like bringing a sword to a gunfight. And honestly, it was only a matter of time before it all blew up in their faces. So on March 18, 2021, El Cholo was captured by CJNG members. And shortly after, a video surfaced. In it, a handcuffed El Cholo confessed to a laundry list of crimes, including the Tonalá massacre. He also made headlines by claiming he had teamed up with Omar Garcia Harfuch, Mexico City's security chief, in an effort to sabotage CJNG. According to El Cholo, the two had even met in Mexico City to strike a deal, but Harfuch, of course, denied everything. And just hours after that video dropped, El Cholo's body was found dumped in Jardín Hidalgo, a park in Tlaquepaque. His corpse was stuffed in black plastic bags, and a message had been stabbed into him with 2 knives. It read, "The traitor, Carlos Enrique Sanchez Martinez, alias El Cholo." A forensic report later revealed just how brutally he had been tortured, both legs broken at the shin and kneecaps, his face disfigured, eyes gouged out, several toes cut off, and evidence of electric shocks before he was executed with 3 gunshots to the head. El Cholo's death became a defining moment in the ongoing cartel conflict across Jalisco. It showed, in graphic detail, what happens when trust breaks down in this world. And for his final message, he told those who supported him in attempting to take down the CJNG that they had better think again. 18-year-old Omar Flores, better known as Elvago, wasn't some major drug lord or anything. but he was definitely climbing the ranks under La Familia Michoacana, a cartel known for its extreme violence. Most of his activity was in Michoacan and the state of Mexico, where Omar had been recruited as what's known in the cartel world as a hawk or hitman. Basically, his job was to carry out killings, and for that he was paid around 5,000 pesos a month, which is about $220. However, around 2020, things took a dark turn. The CJNG decided it was time to take over LFM's drug routes, and that kicked off a vicious war between the two cartels. And in the middle of all that chaos, Elvago got caught. He was captured by CJNG sicarios, and instead of just killing him outright, they chose to make an example out of him. So in the video that later circulated online, you can see Elvago with a bruised and swollen face. One sicario has an AR-15 pointed at his head, while another is holding an iron scimitar under his chin. And during the interrogation, Omar admits he worked under a man known as El Fiero, a cartel commander in charge of several territories, or plazas. He names places called the Zed and Double Sphinxes as part of their turf. And he also confesses to taking part in violent missions in Huetamo, Michoacan. At one point, he even says CJNG is more organized than La Familia Michoacana. Though let's be real, he probably only said that under serious pressure. But even that didn't save him, because just minutes after, Omar was slaughtered like an animal. His limbs were hacked off one by one before he was finally beheaded. And in the end, his dismembered body parts were arranged and put on display as a warning to anyone thinking about crossing the CJNG. This might just be the most outrageous video you'll see today. And no, it's not a movie scene. It's real surveillance footage capturing the exact moment a drug lord was taken down with pinpoint precision. On July 18, 2024, Manuel Villacaña Pacheco, better known as Chuy El Largo or El Grande, walked out of a prison in Aquiles Cerdán, Chihuahua. But just moments after tasting freedom, he was ambushed and killed in a hail of bullets, with some believing it was a rightfully deserved death. You see, Villacaña had a long history with the Sinaloa cartel, specifically its Los Salguero faction based in Chihuahua. He'd built a reputation over the years as a key figure involved in drug trafficking and weapons smuggling, right in the middle of a region constantly shaken by cartel violence. But by August 2023, his criminal activities finally caught up with him, as he was arrested and thrown into Cerezo No. 1, a state prison, facing charges for drug crimes and illegal possession of firearms. But even behind bars, trouble followed him. Chuy El Largo reportedly had serious beef with another inmate known as L21, and that tension never really went away during his time in prison. But let's just say it might have had everything to do with what happened after his release. Because when Villacaña walked out of prison that day in July, he barely had time to take a breather. It appears the gunman had been tipped off about the exact moment of his release. So, the moment his convoy of vehicles hit the highway, a white Durango SUV and a red pickup truck approached from the opposite direction, opening fire on El Largo and his men. By the end of the ambush, over 60 shell casings were scattered across the scene. El Largo was left dead on the street, along with 2 other men, while a 4th was seriously injured. Authorities later recovered 2 AR-15 rifles and additional firearms, clear evidence of how heavily armed the hit squad had been. And in the days that followed, law enforcement arrested a 23-year-old municipal police officer named Luis Fernando, who they strongly suspect may have played a role in coordinating the hit. But the one thing they just couldn't figure out is whether or not L21 was the mastermind before the attack. And at this point, we probably will never know.
Magdaleno Mesa se le dio muerte en octubre del año 2019 en la cárcel de máxima seguridad ubicada en Ilam, Santa Bárbara.
Uno de los reos disparó la pistola contra Magdaleno hasta que se le acabaron las balas, mientras otros 2 lo apuñalaron en reiteradas ocasiones.
Now, seeing inmates openly carrying guns and knives inside a prison, right in front of prison guards, would usually cause an uproar almost anywhere else in the world. People would demand to know how those weapons got in and why those guards seemed cool with it, right? But in one Honduran prison facility, it almost seems normal. And the worst part? It was all caught on camera. As one inmate, a former drug lord, was killed with those very weapons, right there in plain sight. Don't believe me? Well, see for yourself. As Magdaleno Mesa was captured on surveillance camera, getting shot and stabbed to death while prison guards stood by. But long before this, Mesa had built himself a major reputation in Honduras's drug trafficking world. Back then, he was operating under his real name, Neri Lopez Sanabria. He was allegedly working with big names like Victor Hugo Diaz Morales and Devis Rivera Maradiaga, both leaders in the notorious Cachiros crime family. Unfortunately, those same men would later flip and cooperate with U.S. authorities. So to avoid getting caught, Mesa went to extreme lengths to change his identity, starting with him faking his own death. Then, he had plastic surgery to change his appearance. And finally, he changed his name to Magdaleno Mesa Funes. I mean, it was more or less like he wiped away his original identity, but none of that worked. Because on June 5, 2018, police in Honduras finally tracked him down and arrested him. Inside his vehicle, they found a hidden compartment containing 9 spiral-bound notebooks, which were essentially drug ledgers, along with weapons, grenades, and more than $190,000 in cash. Now, those notebooks turned out to be a huge deal because they were filled with details about cocaine shipments and pointed fingers at powerful people, including Juan Antonio Tony Hernandez, a former Honduran congressman, and the brother of then-President Juan Orlando Hernandez, also known as Chore. The ledgers would later be used in a U.S. federal court in New York during Tony Hernandez's drug trafficking trial in October 2019. Meanwhile, Mesa had been transferred to El Pozo prison, a maximum security prison in Ilama, Santa Barbara, and it was clear he was in danger. His lawyer, Carlos Chaitur, had repeatedly warned that Mesa's life was at serious risk, not just because of the harsh conditions he was being held in, but because of the sensitive information he knew. Chaitur even believed the U.S. would soon request his extradition, where Mesa could testify further and possibly implicate President Hernandez himself. And just as his lawyer had suspected, Mesa was murdered, brutally. On October 26, 2019, surveillance footage captured Mesa speaking with several prison guards when a nearby cell pod suddenly opened. The guards quickly ran off, allowing a group of inmates to rush out and attack Mesa, stabbing and shooting him repeatedly, until their gun ran out of bullets and the knife was soaked in his blood. Some of those inmates were even seen warning the guards to stay back while their peers carried out the attack. The whole thing unfolded in just about 40 seconds, and Mesa never had the chance to fight back or escape. And honestly, the way those guards stood by without intervening made it look like a setup, raising suspicions that the government might have been involved. Still, there's no concrete evidence to support that. The prison director, Pedro Ildefonso Armas, was fired shortly after the incident, but was later murdered, adding another chilling layer to the mystery. Meanwhile, the government swept this whole case under the rug, dismissing it as nothing more than a drug trafficking dispute. On July 12, 2024, Martin Elenes Araujo, better known as El Russo, was killed in a brutal ambush in Culiacan, Sinaloa. The 24-year-old was driving his pickup truck when a group of attackers suddenly opened fire, spraying his vehicle with bullets. And even though he was critically injured, Elenes somehow managed to drive to a nearby shopping plaza, where someone captured on camera the moment he lay on the ground, taking his last breath. But while that's where his story ended, it all began back in the early 2000s when Elenes started making a name for himself within the Sinaloa cartel. Born in Sinaloa, he was drawn into the cartel lifestyle early on and eventually rose through the ranks to become a plaza boss, controlling operations across parts of Baja California and Sinaloa. He operated under several aliases, including Jesus Alexander Sanchez Felix, and was closely aligned with the legendary cartel figure Ismael El Mayo Zambada. Elenes belonged to armed groups known as Los Omegas and Los Russos, factions that were fiercely loyal to Zambada. Their job was to enforce the cartel's control and go head-to-head with rival groups, especially Los Chapitos, the faction run by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman's sons. And so by 2022, Elenis was leading a crew of 42 sicarios, hitmen who carried out much of the region's violence through drug trafficking, extortion, and violent turf wars. His position made him an influential player within the cartel, but also painted a big target on his back, especially as tensions escalated between Zambada's loyalists and the Guzman brothers faction. On top of that, the ambush that killed Elenis was almost certainly a targeted hit. The style of the attack, quick, coordinated, and merciless, carried all the hallmarks of cartel warfare. And while no group was officially blamed, it's widely believed that Los Chapitos were behind it, given their long-running feud. And let's just say his death was one more added to the growing list of lives lost to cartel violence in Sinaloa. One man tied down and surrounded by heavily armed men. That's usually the scene for a drug lord about to be executed on camera. And unfortunately, that was exactly the case here. On July 15, 2018, 20-year-old Jose Alfredo Maldonado Jimenez, better known as Freddy Maldonado or by his nickname La Kendra, met a horrific end in Chore, Sinaloa, Mexico. That day, he was kidnapped, interrogated, and savagely executed by a group of more than 15 heavily armed men who were believed to be members of the CJNG. Disturbing videos from that same day started making rounds online, and in the first of many, Freddy was seen being forced to confess to various crimes, clearly under extreme pressure, while surrounded by men holding AK-47s and AR-15s. In a second clip, things got even darker as his body had been picked apart into at least 8 pieces, likely using an axe. One of the men even held up Freddy's severed head to the camera, as if to send a message or a brutal warning aimed at rival cartels. But Freddy's story didn't start there. It goes back years, deep into the murky world of Sinaloa's criminal scene. He was born in July 1998 and raised in Chore, a town long plagued by cartel activity. And by the time he hit his late teens, Freddy was already getting into trouble with the law. Along the line, he got involved with the Sinaloa cartel, but there's not much information on how deep that involvement really was. Still, guess it was enough for a group of sicarios to want him dead, because on July 14, 2018, at around 9 a.m., Freddy was abducted from the Reforma neighborhood in Chore. The men who took him were dressed in black and wore skull-covered balaclavas. Now, during his interrogation, which was filmed, they questioned him about a number of alleged crimes, including the kidnapping and murder of a minor, an act they claimed was ordered by someone known as El Mamito. But this wasn't just about getting answers. The whole thing felt staged, like it was meant to send a brutal message and show off the CJNG's power in the region. Oh, so maybe half the things he confessed to weren't true. Maybe they were not. But after it was all said and done, Freddy was beheaded and dismembered for the world to watch. Sometime in late 2022 or early 2023, a video was recorded showing Efrain Carranza Lopez, better known as Chiripas, being interrogated and then executed by members of La Familia Michoacana. However, in that video, Lopez seemed pretty chill about the situation, almost like he didn't even care. For context, Chiripas was a member of the rival Jalisco Nueva Generacion cartel. Caught in their rivalry, he was kidnapped and interrogated before he was executed. But during that interrogation, Chiripas made it known that he worked as a halcon, a lookout for the CJNG. His job was to keep watch for any police or rival groups around the areas of Carbonera and Toluca. He'd report whatever he saw to his superiors, 2 men known as Ramiro and El Pollo, who were running a meth trafficking operation. Chiripas also mentioned that his pay was irregular. Sometimes he'd get 3,500 pesos, other times only 2,000. It all depended on how much cash his bosses had at the time. His responsibilities also included watching over a safe house that was being used to sell drugs and monitor the area. That safe house was linked to 2 local businesses, a detail that might have exposed some weak spots in CJNG's local operations. Now, the interrogation took place right on the Carboneras Highway, a road in Toluca where La Familia Michoacana holds a lot of power. And Chiripas seemed pretty calm throughout. Not because he didn't care, but because he was devoid of hope, knowing very well that he was trapped in the belly of the beast and there was no way out for him. So he didn't struggle, he didn't cry, he just did as he was told and answered accordingly. And after it was all said and done, he was given a merciful exit, death by firing squad.